Today we've asked Dave to share with all of you key insights and learnings about a post-vaccine COVID workplace. And I think all of us would acknowledge, as leaders, owners, and those that support organizations, this has been one of the most grueling and challenging years probably of our career. I can certainly attest to that. We've been asked to do a number of things: provide a safe and healthy environment for our employees while fighting a virus we couldn't see and frankly, about a year ago, knew almost nothing about. In many segments, we've experienced business interruptions due to the impact of the virus. And in our particular industry, we've seen demand drop of almost 30%. And in many industries, we've seen demand drop as much as 50%. We've been asked to manage teams in a new model, a new work model, many people working remotely. The good news is the light's at the end of the tunnel. But as leaders, we're now faced with probably one of the most important decisions of our careers. When and how do we bring people back to work? What are the implications of those decisions? We have an opportunity individually and collectively to make the right decision and to propel our organizations to the next level. Some of the questions that we've been asked as we interface with people are, do we allow our teams to work at home forever? If so, whom do we allow to work at home? How many days a week? For what duration? Do we bring people back to the same office they left? Is it compelling enough to bring them back? Will the office support the activities, the new activities in this new world? How do we bring our employees back safely? How do we leverage and insights and learnings from the past year that will allow us to bring people back to an even better experience for even better outcomes? So it's our intent in the next 40 minutes or so through Dave to share information that's based on research that'll help answer these questions and at least begin a dialogue that'll help give you information that allows you to, in an informed way, bring your employees back to work safe and better. With that, I'll turn it over to Dave. Thank you.
Well, thanks, George, and good afternoon, everyone. I have a fair amount of material to cover today, so I guess I'll leave the college sports references off the table, especially given how my Spartans have performed this year. And today, I've organized our discussion into three parts. I want to start with some context about Steelcase and ORI before I get into what we believe about return to work and why we believe it. And then I'll close with a few key takeaways. Before I do that, though, I guess I'll start with what this is and what it isn't. It's really not intended to be a sales pitch, but you have to know we are biased. Obviously, being in the furniture industry, both Steelcase and ORI, this may in some ways feel as though we're pitching furniture or pitching what it is we do, but it's really kind of avoidable. But it's not really intended to be a sales pitch, nor is it intended to be a point of view or a prescription for what I see as being intention. Whether it's work from home or from the office, or to which degree, or satellite offices versus headquarters, the level of density in the office, how we support focused task work or collaborative creation, the tensions between the voice of the employee and the employer. The reason it's not meant to be a prescription is I think real estate strategies are different for all of us. So there's no one size fits all. Real estate strategies differ based on the degree of factors that impact each one of our business strategies, whether we're pursuing growth or cost reduction and to what degree, whether we're following or we're a leading innovator, the makeup of our employee base and to what extent we take advantage of low-cost country, digital, the level of disruption, et cetera. So it's not intended to be a sales pitch, and I don't intend to prescribe that you should do this. The material today is really about informing you about things that might help you feel better about how you're thinking about returning to work, or challenge your thinking about when and how you're thinking about coming back to work. So with that, I'll get into a little context about Steelcase and ORI. For those of you that don't know, we lead our industry globally. We're the largest in terms of revenue, both in total revenue, but also international revenue, or revenue outside of our home country. You might recognize some of our domestic competitors, Herman Miller or Haworth or Knoll, H&I. Beyond that, you get into the Japanese competitors before you encounter some of the smaller manufacturers domestically. So we're the largest in our industry, and we're recognized for innovative design, ESG leadership, and civic engagement. I won't go through all of these. I'll just let you know that we take all aspects of leading our industry very seriously, including not only design, but our civic responsibilities and leadership in the areas of ESG. And we operate with what is known in the industry as the best network of partners. We have the strongest distribution in the industry, and I think that's a big reason why we continue to lead the industry. And ORI is no exception. They've been in business for over 50 years in the Kentucky market, and they've been recognized as a premier partner of Steelcase, which is no easy task to get into that club, and they've achieved it for several years, the most recent year being 2019. 2020 premier partners, I'm not even sure that there is a list of premier partners because we're all trying to block 2020 out of our memory, but a strong distribution channel and a strong partner with ORI. We differentiate in our industry through scale benefits and our global reach. And we also differentiate through an insight-led approach to research and innovation. We leverage a number of relationships that are exclusive to Steelcase in our industry, wherein we do research with those partners about things that we see affecting work, worker, and workplace in order to inform how we design our products and applications and solutions for customers. I've highlighted one here at the bottom. We've worked with the MIT Media Lab for years. Most recently, we're working with the Fluid Dynamics and Disease Transmission Lab about how viruses are spread, how pathogens travel through the aerosol in our voice or as we sneeze or cough, in order to help inform us about how we should be designing products and applications differently for more resiliency in a pandemic-aware world. Prior to the pandemic, we recorded a new 20-year high in terms of revenue and operating profitability. It had been a long journey from the financial crisis, but there was a lot happening in our industry, and we had a 20-year high. And what was driving that really was a break from the traditional cycle of capital spending. Normally, you would see, if I showed a longer history, you'd see our industry illustrated in gray tracking pretty closely with broader capital spending. But recently, we were breaking from that trend and actually growing faster than overall capital spending. And that had a lot to do with the war for talent that was happening in the world. And as importantly, was the fact that many people were not happy with their space. Gensler had done a survey, and less than 50% of respondents say their workplace effectively supports individual and collaborative work. So between this input and this input, we were seeing a high engagement in the C-suite, which was keeping investments in space relatively high on the priority list of capital spending. So engaged were they that they were ranking #1. This is a survey from PwC. They were ranking #1 for how they were going to attack attraction and retention of talent as modernizing their work environment, taking into consideration how outdated their spaces were and how it was a tool to help compete for talent. And then we know what happened. The pandemic hit, and like many of you, we suffered a dramatic reduction in our revenue earlier in the year when the state of Michigan shut us down with 12 hours notice. That's offices and factories, distribution centers, everything. And many other parts of the country and the world did the same thing. So our revenue dropped considerably, and like many of you, we took aggressive actions to protect it from being significantly worse. And we, of course, leveraged those cost reductions as things opened back up and we were able to clear out our backlog. But since, we've been operating at a relatively low level of revenue. And the reason I go through that is that I want to share that we've stayed invested. We're operating just a little bit above break even right now, including our estimate for the most recent quarter that we're in right now. And in fact, we're investing even more than we were back in Q3. We got the benefit from increased revenue, but we're investing much of it back as we lean into the recovery. And that's because we believe people are going to go back to work. They need to go back to something different. And it's critical that we're helping our clients and customers ready for that return to work. Unless you think we're crazy, I'll just quickly share that the investment community is also betting on a recovery in the office. The demand for our time is really accelerated in the last, I'd say, couple of months, 2 or 3 months from the investment community. I think in part because they see us as a vaccine play, but also because they believe in the return to the office. The things are changing. Investors are taking increased positions. Our analysts are writing reports that they talk about the light at the end of the tunnel or increased investment in the office furniture industry. So that's a bit of context about us. Let me talk about what we believe about return to work and why we believe it. Whether you follow the science and data or the media headlines, the tide is changing. You'll remember those headlines from early on, Morgan Stanley talking about much less real estate, Facebook workers working remotely for 10 years, Twitter talks about permanent change. We didn't believe that was sustainable. And sure enough, articles started coming up over the summer about working from home losing its effectiveness or productivity falling. And more recently, you start to see large companies taking significant positions in real estate, expanding their investments to take advantage of relatively low lease rates, but also to ready themselves for the return to the office. Now, there are also recent headlines like this one from the Journal just a couple of weeks ago, where Salesforce is acknowledging that their employees will work remotely at least part of the time, even after the pandemic. Interestingly enough, there are other articles, though, like Zillow's CEO, who's warning about a two-class system, that with people working from home and with people working from the office, people are worried, leaders are worried about the potential of a two-class system and somehow feeling, less important if you're working from home, if you're not engaged in the business inside the four walls of the office. And this one I think is really telling. It's not a media headline, it's a risk factor. Google included in their most recent 10K a risk factor that highlights that the shift of remote working environment is creating inherent productivity, connectivity, and oversight challenges. It might affect their internal control over financial reporting. They may experience increased costs as they prepare for a safe return to the work environment, or it might impact their culture more significantly. So I think that's interesting, whether you follow the media headlines or you follow the science and data. We're about science and data. I mentioned earlier, we partner with a number of institutions to complete research. That research we've been updating throughout the pandemic. And you want to talk about distractions, you can hear my dog in the background. I apologize. That was perfectly cued. On the science and data side, what we've been doing is conducting primary studies across working from home and the idea of getting back to the office, as well as the work we've done with the MIT Media Labs, including 32,000 surveys and conversations across 10 countries and thousands of floor plans that we've analyzed. We're not the only ones doing this. You could read Gensler's research that they recently published. You could look at what McKinsey is doing. Everyone is talking about the workplace and how it needs to change as we get ready to return to work. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to focus on these top three. But before I do that, I want to just highlight two others very quickly. And that's our space scan analysis and workplace advisor data analytics. We have a business model that we launched inside of Steelcase that measures utilization and occupancy within the space. And we've also developed tools that help us get an understanding of how the space design in our customers meets existing criteria that are being suggested by the CDC or other health and safety organizations. What that space scan tool is telling us, when we look at the furniture, the workstations that we've sold over the last several years, what it's telling us is that only 21% of those workspaces comply with distance requirements or suggestions, and 79% of those applications are not in compliance with distance or space division. And with pandemic being on everyone's mind, and as we think about coming back into the office before everyone is vaccinated or have had COVID, and therefore herd immunity is accomplished, we're going to need to think about changing the office as they come back. So let me talk about our research around working from home, because it's really informing what people expect as they get back in the office. I'll start by saying work from home isn't all it's cracked up to be. I was scanning as we were starting, I was looking at all of your pictures for those of you that had your videos on, and I was trying to get a sense of the working environments that you're in. These are actual photos from people that were involved in our research, where we asked thousands of people to send us a picture of their work environment from home. And what you can see is it's not all cracked up to be. Now, it's very different for all of you who are executives, many of whom are likely living in relatively big houses. Your children might be grown or are out of the house. And as a result, you've got an office that's comfortable, that has access to natural light and facilitates the kind of work that you're doing. But it's not all that it's cracked up to be, except maybe for executives. What we're learning about what people like about working from home is really the number one thing is the lack of commute. They also, a number of people are saying their ability to focus and be productive is also important. And no distractions. Now, what you're hearing in the background here, cued from my dog, is that there are other things that people don't like, and that is that there are distractions in working from home. What people don't like about working from home is the feeling of isolation and being gradually less productive. And what we're all experiencing is that decision-making is lower and that engagement is actually reduced. What the research has classified as 5 different types of workers that working from home, that range from autonomy seekers, where the home office is seen as a freedom. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, to people that maybe feel safe by being on their own, and it's the only place in this pandemic world that they feel comfortable, to then starting to transition into people that are not happy with the work environment home. Home office is the nonstop flow of competing demands. It's a lonely cage. It's a suspension of reality from normal life and work. And what we see is these folks are anxious to get back to the office. And when we dive more deeply into the research around what they want as they get back to the office, I netted out in two areas. One is safety and one is compelling. They want to feel safe in their environment, and they want it to be really, really compelling. Now, this is safe, but it's not really compelling. And on the safety side, what we have to take into consideration is that the world is becoming pandemic aware. These are still shots from the work that we're doing with MIT Media Labs that illustrate the aerosol from our voice or from a cough or a sneeze and how it travels through the environment, which is helping inform us around air purification, the height of screens and barriers, the physical separation between workstations, etc. You've probably seen YouTube videos that are similar to this, and it's informing the world about the risk of safety, or the risk associated with safety in the office environment. Another area of safety that I think is interesting has to do with the home environment. What we've learned from the research of what companies are planning to do, George made mention to this earlier, some are planning to work from home indefinitely. Others are planning to return fully to the office. Most are thinking about a hybrid, where they might think of the office more as a collaborative environment, and have the home support focused work. They might be on a rotational plan. The reason I bring this up from a safety perspective is every single client that I've talked to about their hybrid, their idea of a hybrid, I've said, that's interesting. Let's talk about the home though. And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, we're starting to see that there's more media attention about safety in the employee's home. OSHA is considering regulations for working remotely. After all, they've already issued guidance or have pending guidance on returning to work and what we need to do to prepare for workplaces to be safe from COVID-19. Don't you think that is going to move toward the home? And as it does, what it's going to require is investment dollars to support it. We're already seeing it in parts of the world like Latin America and in Europe, whether it's labor unions or the government, they're talking about companies needing to reimburse costs of rent, utilities, Wi-Fi, the need to provide better ergonomic support. After all, if this environment in the office is highly regulated, why wouldn't they begin to more highly regulate working from home? My belief is as that happens, CFOs like all of us are going to say, well, I don't know about investing in all of this individually. How am I going to ever get that furniture back if somebody ever leaves the organization? And if I have to make investments in the home, maybe I ought to think about making them in the office. So safety is a big deal. It's on everybody's mind because of the pandemic, but I think it's also about to be on more and more of our minds because of regulation, which is already starting in the office and very likely to make its way back into the home. And as it does that, I think it's going to move our minds and our thinking about the hybrid actually back toward the office. And that's where the opportunity is. How do we create a workplace that draws people in, that makes the commute worth it, that helps people feel more connected and more productive? If we can do that, then I think we will be successful in getting people back into the office. So let me summarize what we think that means. It's about getting back to better. And I'm going to talk about 3 different areas. 5 things people need and expect, 4 macro shifts, and new design principles to support what people want and the macro shifts that are affecting the workplace. And these things that people need and want, they won't surprise you, but they do require you to think about space differently in many aspects. And the first is safety. The second is belonging. The third is productivity. People want to be productive. They want to feel like their work is meaningful and that it's adding value. They want to be comfortable. And what's interesting is comfortable is not just about physical, it's also about cognitive and emotion. And they want to be in control of where they work and how they work. On the safety side, the number one thing, or the top 3 things really, are around air quality, cleanliness, and safety protocols. So very connected to COVID, but with how pandemic aware the world has become, I think this is going to stay on people's minds for the foreseeable future. Certainly, as we go through each cold and flu season, there's going to be attention to air quality and facility cleanliness, etc. The next 2 categories, though, really start to speak to the furniture and the design of the environments that we're in. They link physical distancing and boundaries, screens, barriers, architectural separation, and things like that as being very important to support safety. Density is also a factor. As technology has miniaturized, we've all seen workstations get smaller And with technology enabling mobility, we've seen shared applications increase as well, which all of us, finance, real estate, procurement, have taken advantage of to shrink the workstation, maybe even have them be shared. We've used benching applications that put people in close proximity to facilitate collaboration, but also to save money on real estate. And I think that's going to be under pressure from a safety standpoint as we move people back to the office. And of course, we're also worried about things like visitor protocols and have they been vaccinated? Will they agree to wear a mask while they're in, et cetera. And don't forget, if you're large enough, right, you have on-site food and beverage delivery. There's a whole industry that's being reshaped around food and beverage delivery, in particular in the office. I think the days of salad bars and buffet style lunches are out the window for at least the foreseeable future. So safety is a big factor and it's on people's mind. And if for no other reason, density, physical distancing, and boundary expectations are going to impact the work environment. Now, belonging is also important, and this has to do with a belonging and a sense of community. Now, this is important really because what research has found is that it's one of the best predictors of outcomes like productivity, engagement, retention, innovation, things that are all very important to us. And what research has shown is that this sense of belonging or feeling like there's purpose in my work, I trust who I'm working with, I feel included in the environment, all these things that are about culture. If that's working well and the workplace attributes are supportive of it, then I have a sense of belonging and a sense of community. And this is high on their list. This is number 2 of what people are looking for. Number 3 is productivity. As they feel this longing for productivity engagement, what we found is that their measurement of productivity in working from home has dropped on average 12%. And that's affected engagement on average 14%, which I think is pretty interesting because I think initially some of the chatter, certainly in the media, was that some people were more productive at home. What we're now measuring and what they're providing feedback on is a feeling that they've lost productivity. What they're looking for in returning to the workplace is connectivity with people, an ability to collaborate, whether you're a leader or whether you're an employee. This interaction on Zoom or on Teams or on WebEx or on some other technology has been effective. It's been helpful. And initially it was, I would say, surprisingly better than expected. But many of us are wearing out from these connections and are longing for a physical connection, a meeting face to face. Even if we're wearing a mask, it's better to be in a room together, leveraging whiteboards and other means to collaborate. Employees also want better access to tools. And what's interesting is focus. I mean, I showed you some illustrations of the extreme examples of what it's like for some people working from home. Younger workers that are sharing flats or are in small apartments or who have young children or barking dogs are struggling to focus at home. And they want to get back to the office to focus. And even leaders are saying the same thing. From a comfort perspective, what people want is a range of postures to support the physical comfort at work. They also want a distraction-free environment to enable focused work that I just mentioned. And they want to reconnect to the organization's shared purpose. Collectively, this is referred to often as well-being. So they want a holistic sense of comfort and well-being. And if you don't think people's well-being have been impacted by the pandemic, you don't have to look very far. There was an article that came out in HBR just a couple of weeks ago about what COVID-19 has done to well-being. Whether it's general well-being or workplace well-being, the average decline is 85 or 89%, or said differently, 85% of the respondents said that it had declined both workplace and general well-being. So people want enhanced well-being as they come back in the office, both on the physical, cognitive, and emotional front. And lastly, they want control. They may want to continue to work 1 day a week or less from home, or they might want to work 2 or 3 days or more significantly from home, but they want control in that choice. What's interesting is for years, Steelcase has been offering that choice. You can work from wherever you want to work. In fact, when we first did it, I remember most of the finance organization left. They left, I think, more to test me than anything, whether or not I was truly serious about you can work from wherever you want to work. So I had an empty office for a matter of weeks as people tested me and worked from wherever they wanted, whether it was Starbucks or the home or their cottage. But they came back. And today, most of my employees pre-pandemic choose to work from the office. Why? Because it's the best place. What they want, though, when they're in the office is increased flexibility. They want more control over an ability to reconfigure their furniture. And that has to do with agile working and some of the things that I'll cover in just a second. On the macro shifts that we're seeing, of course, safety and productivity and inspiring spaces are a big deal. Flexibility, this thing that I was just mentioning, is also a factor. And I would summarize them as follows. On the safety side, I think we're going to see OSHA standards and the like probably move from the office into the home, which might influence how we think about our employees working from home and potentially pull them back into the office. But I also think health and safety standards are going to go beyond that and put pressure on buildings to behave more systemically and to embed air purification and other disease mitigation. And I think that's going to be a big part of architectural design as as companies think about bringing their employees back and as spaces, newer spaces are designed and developed. Productivity is going to go from efficiency and single purpose spaces supporting single purpose work to really balancing. I think we went a little heavy on the collaborative front. We went from open, private office cubicle to very open and collaborative. And because of miniaturization of technology, we saw things actually shrink and density play a role in support of collaboration, but also in support of lowering costs. I think we're going to see multimodal spaces. We're going to see a shift back to a more balance between supporting individual work and team needs. And I think we're going to move from more of an aesthetic and a residential influence play to really spaces that inspire and foster community through belonging and resilience. And environmental and social impact are also going to play a growing role. ESG is on everybody's mind, and it's making its way into furniture proposals with almost virtually all of our clients. And I think that's going to be an important shift that we're going to see more and more of. This last one around flexibility is what I was just referencing. The environments today are largely fixed, whether it's architectural walls or furniture. It was designed more for permanence, meaning it wasn't mobile. Whereas I think this is going to shift pretty significantly in the future. Buildings and furniture are going to need to adapt and support flexible ways of working. And one of the ways that it's going to need to support flexible working is agile work. IT teams have been doing this for a while, where they are leveraging mobile furniture to reconfigure their environments for morning startup meetings, and then moving into dyadic programming or project work or individual focus work, and then coming back as a project team. And they want their space to be reconfigurable. What we've seen happening with our clients is this agile working that started in IT is really catching on and moving into product development and actually into other functions. You'll see it at the end here that I've actually invested in redesigning our finance space to support more flexible work, a version of agile working in the finance function. The new design principles that we're talking to clients about to support a better work experience have to do with me and we. Not just we and not just me, but both, and having an ability to fluidly move between focused work and collaborative work. We also see this fixed to fluid, which is connected to this agile working that I'm describing. We don't see spaces being put in stone by facility managers and never reconfigured again. We actually think that facility leaders are going to want to reconfigure their environments, and employees are going to want to have more flexibility with their spaces. We see open and enclosed spaces continuing, but I'll show you in an illustration here in a second that we see that amping up considerably. And we also see a braiding of the digital and physical. That's a little bit of marketing speak. The way I kind of registered that in my head is living on video. I think we're gonna live on video for the foreseeable future. I don't imagine going back to the office and having everybody in the office all at the same time, especially if we allow freedom of control of where they work and how they work. I imagine meetings will always have someone on video. We used to have it because they were living or working in a different part of the country or the world. But I think now we're going to have it as well because they're living and working from home or other locations. And that's going to need to be supported not only in the conference rooms, but I think at the individual workstations. Because when I'm in the office or if I'm at home, I'm connecting with my people on video outside of scheduled meetings. Sure, I call them on occasion with my phone, or I certainly leverage texting or instant messaging. But when I go to instant message them and I see a green light, my tendency has shifted to just pinging them on video. And we have a quick chat, just like we used to do when we were in the office together and I could walk 10 feet and ask them a question or engage with them on a specific topic. So we see living on video playing a big role in the office, both in the conference rooms, but also at the individual workstation. And here are some visual illustrations of what we mean by me and we. I think the spaces are going to need to accommodate acoustical and visual privacy. They're going to need to be adjacent, like I described before. I don't think you'll have, all the individual workstations in one area and all of the meeting rooms in another area. I think it's going to be more intermixed because I think we're going to be moving back and forth from me and we and needing privacy and needing varying degrees of privacy. So we see me and we design principle as being pretty important, along with this fixed and fluid. Whether it's about the movement of traditional learning to active learning or more about supporting agile work, we see the need for more mobility of furniture and the ability for users to be able to reconfigure their environment to support individual work or startup meetings or training sessions, etc. We see the environment becoming more adaptable and mobile and fluid. On the open and closed, I don't mean to suggest that only collaborative work will be done in enclosed spaces. We see and have been experimenting for years with collaborative spaces in the open plan. Some employees may like this from a safety perspective because of it's not containing the aerosol spray of voices in the room. Others like it because it's highly adjacent to where they're doing individual work. I'm working in here, somebody stops by, wants to have a quick discussion. We need to leverage technology, and immediately adjacent is a small collaborative space. We see this as both supporting individual work in the closed space, individual work in the open space, but also collaborative work in enclosed spaces and in the open environment. And that's what we mean by open and closed. And the braiding of the digital and physical, as I said before, is really about living on video and leveraging technology and really recognizing that virtually everything that we're going to encounter for at least the foreseeable future is going to include people connecting from alternative places than just the office. So those are the design principles. I talked a little bit about what employees expect, the macro shifts that we're seeing, and I just shared some of the design principles that we think are going to affect spaces. So why should you care? I'll tell you why I care. My finance organization engages very deeply and broadly with our organization. Where we rank on some of these factors that affect strategy is we're pivoting more toward growth from cost reduction. We're trying to sustain our innovation. We're a global player that leverages low-cost country for transaction-based processing and various other work that supports our business. We're moving toward digital. We're defending against disruption of work from home and miniaturization of technology and the like. And we're trying to maintain a talent-rich environment with highly engaged employees. To do that and to do that well, my people have to be together. In finance at Steelcase, we recently went through a benchmarking exercise for the entire organization, and finance actually measured higher than benchmark. Now, that's not a good thing. That means our costs are higher as a percentage of revenue than benchmark, and we're the leader in our industry. It's not because we're higher in internal audit or treasury or tax or corporate or other areas like that. It's because of the amount of business partnering we do with the company. And when I asked the executive team at Steelcase what they wanted me to do about that, they all said nothing. We're a pipeline of talent for talent to the rest of the organization. Last year alone, I had 15 people move from finance into other parts of the organization, and not just benefits and compensation or procurement, into sales roles, into marketing roles, into operations, into IT, into project management. So what we're allowed to do in the company is operate higher than benchmark because we're seen as adding that value. And I believe our secret sauce is driven by how deeply we engage with the business, how closely we work shoulder to shoulder with our business partners. And in order to maintain that differentiation and ability to operate at a higher than benchmark level, we've got to maintain that special sauce. And we know it has to do with us being in the office. So in order to get my people back into the office, I knew I had to change. Like many of you, I took advantage of the fact that they were in meetings, they were highly mobile, that cost is a factor. So I had them in densely packed benching applications. But to get them back into the office, I needed to invest to improve safety, to support the distributed work, allow them to do video in the open plan, and I needed to inspire them. So we invested in freestanding height adjustable workstations with screens and barriers and replaced our densely packed environment with this. And we were the first function in the company to do so. We did this back in the summer before the second wave of COVID, when we were bringing our employees back into the office. We had almost 2/3 of our employees in total were back in the office, and finance was leading the way. And in order to lead the way, we needed to change the environment that was supporting them. What we did was we provided, you can see, screens, barriers, technology, work tools, but we also embedded mobility in this furniture. All of these height adjustable desks are on embedded casters that allow us, if and when we choose to move back into clusters of project teams and groups that need to be in closer proximity, we can do that, and we can reconfigure the environment on our own. So I thought it was important to share with you that I'm putting my money where my mouth is by being the first function inside of Steelcase to make a change, to get our people back to work, because it's how we differentiate and add value to the company. So I guess there are lots of takeaways I could leave you with. I could recap, the macro shifts. I could recap what employees want as they think about coming back to the office. I could talk about the design principles. I could talk about what's happening with the hybrid model and how safety is likely to move to the home, which is likely to create costs and bring people back to the office. But I think the key is that it's not status quo right now. So what I tell my peers is be careful leaving real estate strategies to facility and procurement right now. Because we give it to facilities and procurement largely because we want them to do copy paste. We figured out the model. We know what the model is, and as we add employees, we want more of the same, so copy paste and bring it in. Or be careful to not to over optimize for cost only. Now, when I tell finance people that, they often kind of give me a look like, yeah, okay, yeah, you don't understand. No, I do understand. I'm in an industry that is being disrupted by technology, which is miniaturized and changed how people work. I'm in an industry where technology is enabling work from home. There are question marks about what degree people will go back to working in the office. So I'm very, very cost conscious. But I also see space as a strategic asset. And therefore, I think it's important that we make sure we don't over optimize for cost only. And that's because real estate strategies are affecting things that range from engagement and productivity to creativity and innovation. And the C-suite's engaging because of culture and well-being and engagement. So and the reason they're engaging is because they see it more as a strategic asset that affects strategy, talent, and culture. So again, this was not intended to be a sales pitch. I was not intending to prescribe it. We are biased. And so I'll tell you, we really only scratched the surface today. And I felt it was as important to set up this discussion and dip into the research as it was to actually dive in to the core message and principles. There's a lot more here today. Our work better tools run deep and our resources run wide, which is why George is actually offering each of you a benefit through their dealership, where they're going to offer to you an hour worth of consulting, essentially, that will allow a space scan analysis done on your environment. Now, for all of your companies, it may not be able to be completed in an hour. They might only be able to do a certain area. But if you want more, ORI is a great place to go, and this would be a great place to start, because if nothing else, it'll help inform you how to think about your current environment and initially bringing employees back, as well as start to inform you how you might need to make longer term changes and modifications to your environment. So with that, I will turn it back to our moderator, and happy to take as many questions as you have, or in the spirit of delegation that George was mentioning earlier, I'll gladly delegate them back to him.